Hey there Retro Games fans, this is Andy C from Piece of 8-Bit. Welcome to this week's video, and today we're going to be looking at one of the biggest claims in video game history. You'll hear it parroted frequently in documentaries, in retro books and gaming magazines, and that is Nintendo saved the video game industry. Now that might sound dramatic, heroic even, but like most things in gaming history, the reality is perhaps a little bit more nuanced. Wind back to 1983, the American video gaming market had pretty much collapsed in dramatic fashion. Too many consoles, too many rush games, and retailers who had essentially lost confidence completely in the entire industry. But something important which often gets forgotten is that that crash didn't happen everywhere. It was largely a North American retail crash. I remember playing Night Law and Dizzy on the ZX Spectrum here in the UK, blissfully unaware that across the pond everything was in a state of complete chaos and meltdown. I was only 6, I suppose, so maybe that sort of thing just wasn't something I was worrying about anyway. But let's not forget also that arcades were still doing really, really well. Home computers were thriving at that point, and over in Japan the industry was actually growing, and that's where Nintendo enters the story. Company released the Famicom, the family computer, in Japan, a huge success. But when Nintendo brought the system to America in the mid-80s, they did something rather clever. They didn't just market it as a video games console. Instead, they called it the Nintendo Entertainment System. An entertainment system was an entirely new concept back in the mid-80s, and alongside that console came a plumber who would go on to define the medium. So today what we're going to do is we're going to play through the 3 main Mario games released on the NES, Super Mario Bros. 1, 2 and 3. We'll compare them, we'll explore how the series has evolved, and we'll talk about why the 3rd game was absolutely critical for Nintendo. And along the way, we'll also ask the big question, did Mario really save gaming? Let's start with the game that changed absolutely everything. Okay, World 1-1, possibly the most famous opening level in video game history. You've all seen it, you've most likely all played it. Whether you are young or old, well then this is going to be familiar to all of you. And that opening theme tune, it is absolutely synonymous with gaming. It's just instantly recognisable. This is also the opening of a game that really defined what 2D side-scrolling platformers would be like for years to come, and it still represents one of the most iconic moments in gaming history and folklore. And what makes this level so remarkable, and this game so remarkable, is just how much it teaches the player to play without even saying a single word. So you come into this game, you start with an open space to move, a Goomba approaches, you jump on its head, which is your instinct, you hit a question block, and the mushroom comes out, and you discover the super mushroom and it makes you grow and whatever. Within about 30 seconds, the game has completely taught you all the core mechanics of Mario, that movement, the timing, the risk, and of course the reward. Let's just gloss over what we just saw on the screen there. I completely didn't do that properly. And that's what that part is what made Super Mario Bros. So important. It wasn't just a good game, it was a really polished one, and like nothing we'd ever really seen in the home up to that point. Nintendo had learned from the mistakes of the early 80s gaming boom, so instead of letting anyone just publish anything, they imposed strict rules on the NES ecosystem. Third-party developers had to be licensed. Nintendo manufactures all the cartridges themselves, and publishers were limited in how many games they could release each year. I think it's about 5. And the console included something called the 10NES lockout chip, which prevented unlicensed games from running. And it all sounds a bit like Apple, but in 1983. All of this fed into something that became incredibly iconic, and that is the Nintendo seal of quality. Now, the seal didn't always guarantee that you were going to have a masterpiece, but it did guarantee that the game would pass Nintendo's approval process. After that chaotic Atari era, that level of control really only helped just to rebuild trust. It was absolutely essential. And then retailers were able to trust the platform, players were able to trust the games, and Super Mario Bros. Became the perfect example of that new philosophy, something which we would still see some 40 odd years later on the Switch too. This game sold tens of millions of copies, and it immediately became the face of the NES. Mario and Nintendo, of course, are synonymous these days. So if the console rebuilt confidence in gaming, then of course Mario was the mascot, absolutely leading that charge. Let's carry on looking at this game for just a couple more minutes, because I am gonna skip forward. Oh, I died actually. I'm going to go to the warp zone bit. I'm going to play a little bit more of it, and I'll talk a few more minutes, and then we'll have a look at Super Mario 2. So, yeah, and I've played this game so many times, more times than I care to imagine. The kids have played it. Everybody's played it. Everybody knows this game. Anybody who's played a game in their life has probably played Super Mario Brothers. It was like nothing else that I'd ever seen before at that era. I didn't see this until probably later in the 80s. I used to go to this... it was called the Recreation Club at school, and they had an NES, and it was the first time I saw it, so it would have been late 80s, early 90s. And everybody wanted to play this game, at which point this game was probably 5 or 6 years old, just going into the warp zone. A well-known shortcut. I'm going to go straight for 4 because I'm a sucker for punishment. Yeah, this game was just brilliant. That soundtrack, I knew the soundtrack, I knew the game before I'd even played it. And it's quite a hard game. It's a really challenging game. Even you play games nowadays, and you can save and all of those kind of things. But these old games, you couldn't do that. This game was it was hard. It was tricky to play. It was very challenging, but it looked amazing. There was just nothing else like it that just looked this good or sounded this good. So yeah, it was incredible. I don't know why I picked World 4 because this is really hard, this level. And as you will see in a moment, I totally screw up. And even that sound when you die is absolutely, like it's synonymous. People are aware of it. There you go. There it is. All right, so that is Super Mario Bros. And that is just an iconic game. We'll talk a little bit more about it later. But let's get on to Super Mario Brothers 2. Now, this is where things get quite interesting. You are currently seeing Super Mario Bros. 2 on the screen, but perhaps not something you were expecting to see if you're watching this from Europe or the USA. This doesn't look like the Super Mario Bros. 2 you've seen before, and in fact, it looks a lot like the first game. In Japan, Nintendo released a direct sequel that looked very similar to the first game, but it was notoriously difficult, and I can absolutely vouch for that. It is incredibly tough. Nintendo of America believed Western players might find this frustrating or even unfair. They were correct. So instead they did something kind of unusual. They took a completely different game called Yume Kojo Doki Doki Panic and reworked it into a Mario title. Apologies if I pronounced that wrong. Characters were replaced, graphics were adjusted, and suddenly it became the Super Mario Bros. 2 that you and I are probably much more familiar with. Which explains why this game feels so different. Instead of stomping on enemies now, you're picking them up and you're throwing them. Instead of one character, you've now got 4. So you've got Mario, you've got Luigi, Princess Peach and Toad, each with their own abilities, and the level design also reflects that too. There's a lot more vertical movement, there's more puzzle elements, there's a lot more experimentation, and the power boxes are back from the original Mario Brothers game. It's creative and it's really, really colourful, but it's also a really big detour from the formula that was established by the first game. For some, it is definitely a cult favourite. I don't mind it. I think it's got some really catchy music, and I really do quite like the look of it, especially compared to its predecessor, considering it's on the same platform. For others, it is the odd one out in the trilogy. I think it is the odd one out in the trilogy, but I don't think that is a bad thing. In hindsight, it shows something really interesting about Nintendo though, and that is that they were willing to experiment even with what is now their biggest franchise. You can play the original Super Mario Bros. 2, by the way, as the Lost Levels. You can find them on the Switch if you've got a Nintendo Online subscription, and when you do, I think you'll be thankful for the game that we ended up actually getting, because the ramp up in difficulty is immense, and it makes the game actually quite frustrating. On the plus side, there's probably an entire, well, there's an entire whole classic Super Mario game that you've probably never even played before, which you can now go cut your teeth on, which is great, of course. But I think I'm kind of glad that this is the game that we got. The fact that this game wasn't quite what people expected did mean that there was a huge amount of anticipation for what came next. Obviously, we'll talk about Super Mario Bros. 3 in a moment. I just want to talk a little bit about my experience of the gameplay on here and my thoughts on this game. And the first most important thought is that where the first game is iconic because it's original and new, I think where this game really shines is just how colourful it is. It's really, really colourful. It's quite pretty, and you'd almost be forgiven for thinking that this isn't on the same console as the original game. It is a real leap forward technically. So I think it's really good. I think it was a good move by Nintendo to say, do you know what, we're not happy with this game. We don't think it's going to work for our Western audiences, so we're going to do something different. And they took this other game and readapted it for Mario to keep the franchise going and keep it sensible. But it does definitely not feel like a Mario game that we've probably become used to on the, well, obviously the original one from the early 80s. So, yes, I think it's a really good game. It's really hard, actually. It is actually quite challenging, and you know, I think you know, it doesn't have that same lead into the game that you have on the original one. You sort of get taught about the fact you got to jump on the animals. It's a little bit misleading. So you go to jump on them, and then suddenly you're moving around. It's like, what do I do now? So there's elements of it that seem a bit strange to me, but once you get the hang of it, it's good. It is, like I said, it is actually quite hard. It's quite a challenging game, but certainly not as challenging as the original Super Mario Bros. 2 that they got in Japan. Definitely go check that out, by the way. Okay, so there we go. So let's just watch a couple more minutes of this, and then we're going to go and have a look at Super Mario Bros. 3. By the time Super Mario Bros. 3 arrived, as we discussed, the expectations were enormous, and I mean enormous. Huge anticipation for this game. The NES was already hugely successful at this point, but competition was starting to appear. Blue Hedgehog, anyone? And Nintendo needed to prove the system still had room to evolve, and boy did they do that in spades when Super Mario Bros. 3 arrived. The first thing you notice is the world map. So instead of simply moving from one level to the next, the game introduces a new strategic kind of overworld. Players can now choose paths, they can discover secrets and approach the game in different ways depending on their mood. Then you've got your power-ups, so we've got the raccoon leaf, the tanuki suit and the frog suit. Each one fundamentally changes how the game is played. But perhaps the most impressive part is just how much the visuals have improved. The environments are more detailed, the animations are a lot smoother, the level design is now far more varied. And in many ways, this game feels like the NES operating at full capacity. And to be honest, if you compare the original game to this one, you could be forgiven for thinking it's on a different platform. What Nintendo squeezed out of this now aging console is nothing short of a miracle. And for many players, Super Mario Bros. 3 is not just the best Mario game on the system, but it's probably one of the greatest of the entire 8-bit era, and far be it from me to disagree. Not least, actually, because this Mario game is one of the few that I consider myself to be actually pretty decent at. I've recorded quite a lot of footage because I recorded the footage for this, and then I ended up playing it for about 20 more minutes, and I could have carried on for a bit longer as well because I had a load of lives left, but I felt like I probably should do other things, like finish recording this video. But let's have a closer look at the game, and I'll talk you through some of my thoughts. So at the moment, obviously, you can see here that Mario's got his raccoon leaf power up, which means that he's got this ability to sort of fly. I cannot believe I just avoided that. That was close. You can see me ducking down as well because I can't remember where all the tubes are that you go down in this game. It had been a little while since I played it, but I really love Super Mario Bros. 3. I just think it's amazing, and it just feels like a generational leap on the same generation. Like I said before, it's pretty good. I quite like, you can see here, I quite like the length of the levels as well. The levels are like quite short, which is quite good, so it feels like you're achieving a lot quite quickly. Here's that overworld here, so I could go to 3 or to 4 there if I wanted to, and then not play the other one if I chose to. I could play all of it if I wanted to. Love the soundtrack in this as well. Some really, really good music in this, as indeed there were in all 3 of the titles. I think all 3 actually. Oh man, how did I get away with that? I didn't. Yeah, all 3 titles have some fantastic music, and I think that was the thing as well. You know, we saw it with Sonic in the 90s as well. You know, I think having a good, catchy soundtrack in your game just added so much to it. It just made it feel so much better. But yeah, I just really enjoy this. But I enjoy all 3, and I enjoy all 3 for very different reasons. I think they are just fantastic. They all sound amazing. They're all so iconic. They all look great. And you know, when you consider, like for me, in the 80s, I was playing most of my games on a ZX Spectrum, so a bit limited on the number of colours. I cannot believe I got that and then immediately lost it. You know, we were pretty limited on colours. The graphics were pretty basic, and then you saw this at the same era. You know, this felt like arcade gaming in your home. It just felt like such an incredible thing to look at. You know, when you compare that to other games that we were playing at the time. So, you know, these games are so important and they're so iconic, but they're still so much fun. You can still play them today. Kids will still play them. People are speedrunning them. People love these games. And the essence, the DNA of these original... Oh, that's a good shout. 5 up. DNA of these original Mario games is still in even the latest stuff that we play. They're just fantastic. So let's go and grab my final thoughts on this now, and let's wrap up this little dive into the world of Mario. I'll see you there. So, looking back at the trilogy, each game represents a different stage in Mario's evolution. So let's just quickly recap on that then. So starting with Super Mario Brothers, well, this is the foundation, right? We know that. This is the start of it all, if you exclude Donkey Kong and Mario Bros, of course. The design is really elegant, it's focused, it's really tight, and today it's incredibly playable still. In fact, speedrunning Mario has become somewhat of a rite of passage amongst retro gaming communities. The graphics are really simple but very clear. Koji Kondo's music became instantly iconic, and I mean iconic with a capital I, right? Instantly recognisable, you know exactly where it's come from when you hear it. And from a historical perspective, this game is arguably the most important of the 3. It really helps to establish the NES as a trusted platform and turn Mario into what is now a household name. maybe we won't talk about the 80s movie carrying the Super Mario name, and we'll just move on to Super Mario Bros. 2, of course. This is the experimental entry, and the mechanics are different, of course, as we've discussed. The structure is unusual, and the gameplay leans more towards puzzle solving than traditional platforming, something which we've become used to by this point. It might not feel like a traditional Mario game, and we now know why, but it introduced elements that would influence titles later, including character variety and much more vertical level design. Then finally, Super Mario Bros. 3, and this is the refinement game. Everything feels bigger in this game, it feels richer, and certainly feels a lot more ambitious. The world map adds that level of strategy, the power-ups add additional variety, and the level design, of course, arguably is some of the best ever created for the NES. For me, I think this is the best of the three in terms of gameplay and replayability, but the original game, of course, still wins when it comes to that massive historical impact. And that then brings us back to the question I asked at the start, which is, did Mario actually save gaming? Well, not exactly. That's not exactly true. The crash of '83 was largely confined to the US, as we mentioned. But Nintendo totally and absolutely rebuilt the home console market there through that strict quality control, those licensing rules, and that carefully managed ecosystem. And something which we've come to expect from Nintendo some 40 years later. Those ideas, of course, still exist today, and we see that in modern console platforms. Mario became the symbol of all of that new era post '83. That legacy didn't just stop with the NES either. In 1989, Mario appeared in Super Mario Land, helping to launch the Game Boy, one of my absolute favourite Super Mario Brothers games, one that I actually completed back in the day when that actually still meant something. And then in the 90s, the character leapt into 3D with Super Mario 64, and this redefined how 3D platformers were going to work and set the bar again for games that followed in that genre. And the series continued to evolve through titles like Super Mario Sunshine on the Cube, one of my favourites because they tinkered with the formula too much. But returning to form with titles such as Odyssey, much more recently, this is a fantastic game full of challenges, great level design, and it's got a good dose of nostalgia for us older Mario fans out there too. So along the way, of course, Mario also spawned entire franchises of his own, from Dr. Mario to the racing phenomenon that is Mario Kart, which we all know and love, and the crossover juggernaut, of course, Super Smash Bros. Even teaming up with rival Sonic in a few titles after Sega stepped away from making consoles some sort of 25 years ago. So Mario didn't save gaming on his own, that much is true, but he certainly became one of its most recognisable symbols. He is arguably the Mickey Mouse of the gaming world, and I don't mean that in a bad way, instantly recognisable by many gamers and non-gamers alike, and more than 40 years later, that Italian plumber is still going strong in his games and also putting the wrongs right in his movie spin-offs. Definitely, the new ones are a lot better. Even his brother has had success in his Fantastic Mansion games, and even one of his antagonists, actually, Wario, has done all right for himself too. So everyone's a winner. All this, well, not bad for a character who originally appeared as a carpenter in an arcade game. Of course, that is Donkey Kong. I had to look that up because I'd forgotten that he was a carpenter. I was like, when was he a carpenter? So Mario was originally a carpenter. Oh yeah, of course, yeah, Donkey Kong. So there you go, that is it. I hope you enjoyed that. I enjoyed going and looking into that and doing the research on it, and learned a couple of things, most notably around Mario 2. I had a feeling that it was based on another game, but I didn't know the exact specifics of it. So that was quite an interesting voyage of discovery for me. In terms of playing the games, I played all of them before. Probably played 3 the most, although Super Mario Land on the Game Boy is probably the one I played the most out of all of the Mario games over the years. But I love these, and I can go back and play any one of these 3 on the NES. They are incredibly important games. We've seen them re-released. We saw them re-released on the SNES and the All-Stars, and they were jazzed up a little bit, and they were fantastic. So they really do stand the test of time. They're fantastic, and it is just goes to demonstrate you don't need to have the best, most cutting-edge graphics to make a good game. Sometimes it is just about simplicity, that control scheme, the music, you know, some of those elements that just give it that X factor, which just makes it really, really good. So coming up in the channel, obviously we're going to be continuing over the next few weeks with the NES. Obviously there will be less of the bit-betweens. There may not be any at all. It depends on how much time I get. As I mentioned in a previous video, my circumstances in life have changed a little bit, so I've got a bit less time to make the volume of videos that you may be used to. So I'll do bit betweens and Monday minutes when I have time to do it. I still want to do them, it's just I don't have a lot of time. So next week we'll be having another look at something else on the NES, and we've also got a racing challenge to come up as well, which is going to be WRC Arcade. So I'll grab Oliver for that. That's the Retro Red Steve Racing Challenge. So I will grab Ollie for that one, and it's 8 all on the series, so it'll be all to play for to see who can take the lead with that. So stay tuned for that. Of course, if you do enjoy these videos, please support me by hitting that like and subscribe button. I really do appreciate it. Thanks ever so much for all your support so far. Obviously hit that bell icon to get notifications for anything new that's coming on the channel. Other than that, just leaves me to say, yeah, please do all take care of yourselves. Take care of yourselves, I can't even speak. And until the next time, I'll see you around. Bye for now.